Hey everyone, and welcome back to Newegg TV. My name is Paul, and once again we have a special guest here in the studio. This is Jim from Microsoft. How's it going, Jim?
Great, Paul. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming by today. And we're continuing our discussion of Microsoft's Windows Server 2012. We have a couple other videos available, so if you guys want to check those out. This video is going to specifically be talking about virtualization. And let's just start out from square one here.
Sure.
Let's say I don't know at all what virtualization is.
Right.
What is it?
So what virtualization effectively does, Paul, is it virtualizes the set of resources that a server has. And those resources are usually isolated to processing power, its memory, and storage and networking. And it enables a server that's got a lot of capacity to then run virtual servers on top of that. Mm-hmm. So in the past, we used to have dedicated workloads to servers. In some cases, a server might run 2 or 3 workloads, like file sharing and print sharing, and then maybe an application. But with server densities as much as they are today, we have server processors that support 6, 8, 10 cores. Mm-hmm. You can run effectively a lot more applications on top of that server. So what virtualization has effectively done is created an opportunity for customers to run a lot of workloads on bigger servers and effectively consolidate their hardware footprint while they're still utilizing a lot more of that server horsepower.
Okay. Now, the idea that I sort of formulate with this description and sort of what I've read about virtualization in the past,
sure.
It goes back to my old video games I used to play, actually. So I used to play video games. I still do now, I'll be honest. But the older video game consoles, now that we have newer computers that are much, much, much faster than that, yep. They have emulators. Yep. So sometimes I'll get an emulator for an old video game console, and I'll be able to play my old video games on my current machine. And that emulator thinks it's that old console that I'm
yep.
playing on, and it can play that game, and it's sort of a virtual console that I'm playing within my computer.
Right.
Is that sort of
the concept? You're getting there definitely right. with the concept.
So
what's different about the emulator versus a virtual machine is that the virtual machine is actually a full-fledged server. It has an operating system. It has access to the network card. It has access to storage and memory. It runs an application just as if it would be running on a physical server.
Okay.
The only difference is there's a hypervisor in between that.
Okay.
And for Microsoft, that hypervisor is Hyper-V.
Hyper-V, which is a great acronym. I guess it's not an acronym.
It's actually a full product name.
Full product name, Hyper-V, hypervisor. Yeah. And so there you have your Server 2012 running.
Yep.
And then you might have virtual machines, which might be doing any variety of things or running exactly. Other virtual operating systems. Exactly. Hypervisor is kind of that in-between layer that's helping to containerize those virtual machines.
You bet.
Okay. Well, that gives at least me a better explanation. Hopefully you guys have a bit better understanding of that. And I imagine that Microsoft would not have devoted so many resources towards building out this software and this virtualization capability unless it had some benefits.
Oh, it does. So
okay.
Virtualization has a number of very, very obvious benefits. The first and foremost is, as I said earlier, server platforms have been evolving quite a bit. So we have very dense servers. In fact, we're running servers today in our labs that have 128 gigs of memory. There's mm-hmm. some servers that have a lot more than that. Multi-processor is the new 1P in the world of the servers. Mm-hmm. And each of those processors are running multiple cores. So you can imagine from a density standpoint that you can run any number of VMs on it. We've seen what we call VM density on servers evolve the last 5 years from, say, an average of 5 to 6 to as much as 8 to 12 VMs running on a single server. So what that really meant in the past was where I used to have maybe 12 physical servers running for my business, now I have 1 if it's a really big one, and I'm running all those as VMs.
Okay,
so an obvious benefit is server consolidation.
So if I'm an if I'm the IT guy for a company and I'm investing the company's money in purchasing this hardware,
right.
and then the hardware is running at 20% load all the time, right. I'm not necessarily taking advantage of that. With virtual machines, you can actually kind of not max out, but you can actually put a much larger load on any given server, and the technology has evolved to the point where it can actually handle all those virtual machines individual, as you said, 8, 10 plus.
Right. And we've run studies with customers, and we're seeing that, and these are all laws of averages, so not to be quoted, but we're seeing some customers in the non-virtualized space having server utilization rates somewhere in the range of 10 to 20% at peaks. When they go virtualized, they have fewer servers, and those servers are usually running in the ranges of 60 to about 80% of utilization.
Okay, so
you can see that you can take any number of physical servers and consolidate them down into smaller, bigger servers that have the capability of running multiple workloads.
Okay,
were
and
VMs.
you're just getting a lot more bang for your buck and
You are.
getting your actual horsepower out of the hardware that you've invested in.
You are.
Now, another feature of servers, just generally speaking, is going to be data protection, data integrity, and also disaster recovery. So
Right.
how does virtualization assist in those functions?
Virtualization actually helps enable that very strongly. So
Okay.
in the past, when I had physical servers in my environment, if there were some unforeseen circumstance that created an outage, those servers were running dedicated workloads. Well, with VMs, you have this ability. So we have a feature called live migration, which allows a customer to freely move a VM from one physical server to another over the network and have no disruption to its workload at all. So users could be hitting that workload and working away and not knowing in the background that everything associated with that VM has been moved to another physical server. So DR situations are made much more simple, or solved much more simply rather, with virtualization.
Now, if I can again equate this to my experience, which is more with individual desktop computers, usually when I do an operating system install and I do all my updates and everything and install it, I will create an image of that. So what we're talking about here is you have your server, you have your virtual machines. Those virtual machines individually can be imaged basically, so you can recover that. They're backed up by means of the Windows Server 2012 software. And then if you have a machine that crashes or dies or falls off a cliff or anything like that, you can basically take your image of that, rebuild it from nothing. And then you were saying actually in one of our earlier videos, it's actually the Server 2012 software itself, not just the VMs, but the entire thing can all be entirely backed up if you
so you can back up cloud services. There's a hierarchy, obviously, so you can back up the VMs, you can replicate the VMs, you can freely move the VMs. So if that server will lose power, we have a feature which we'll get into a little later called Hyper-V Replica, which takes a replica of the actual VM, and if that one primary VM were to fail, the Hyper-V Replica VM would spin up in a matter of moments, and there'd be no disruption to the user's ability to work with that.
So with that feature, you don't even need to get involved as the IT person. It actually just would recognize that failure.
There's a certain number of tools in our server manager. Server manager is the management interface that we use within Windows Server 2012 to administer the machine itself. So there's features and rules that you can set up through Server Manager, or if you're a large enterprise, you can use System Center to do the same. So that gets all automated in the back end.
All right, so you got your data backed up, you have your VMs backed up, you have your server installation backed up, assuming that you're running a data center, you have multiple versions of these, or if you're going for the cloud backup services as well, which are also available.
Right, absolutely.
And
so
then,
you can actually physically, so with Windows Server 2012, we've done a lot of really neat stuff. And for people that follow the server business, this is big deals, right? So we now can physically move a VM from a primary data center, let's assume this is a customer's data center, to a co-load data center somewhere else. And not only just move the VM, but move all of its network settings, its storage, and everything as one entire VM to another site with no disruption to the customer whatsoever.
Wow, so no downtime.
No downtime. And that's a big deal for those who are looking to move virtual machines from their primary data center to a hosted data center. Because in that world, in the past, there's the concept called VLANs, where you had to configure the network settings on the hosting site as well as your primary site and then move the VMs. Well, that's sort of a thing of the past. We've done a lot of great work on storage virtualization, so beyond what we call beyond virtualization. We've looked at the VMs and we looked at everything that the VM would have to integrate and interact with to be able to move freely. And so we virtualized the storage pool, we virtualized the networking pool, and now we're able to freely move a VM from within a data center or outside of a data center with all of its settings, all of its storage, all of its networking intact.
I imagine that would also help with like decentralization if you have like a single server cluster in one location, and you definitely want to have that multiple locations just to prevent disaster recovery. I imagine migrating that from one location to another is made much easier.
Much easier.
Okay, so we've got disaster recovery, data protection, and then also we have the mobility, the ability to take, whether you're talking about your entire server or whether you're talking about individual VMs running individual services, move them around at will.
Exactly. And so on the data protection side, we have a product in System Center called Data Protection Manager that does snapshots of the server. We also have capabilities in Windows Server 2012 and in Storage Server 2012, which are sister products that allow you to take images of that server. So if the VM were to go down for whatever reason, you'd have backup copies to be able to restore it.
So we've talked about some of the benefits of virtualization, and let's say I am a business owner and I know I'm going to run X, Y, and Z applications. Sure. Those applications have their own data sets, their own databases, and I want to know, is this application supported or validated for use with Server 2012? Is there a resource where I could go to?
We actually have a number of certification references on Microsoft.com. One of them is the Microsoft Server Validation, Virtualization Validation Program, or SVVP, that you can go and check to make sure that your workload is validated. We also validate and support any number of operating systems that are either Windows-based or Linux-based, and we have a few variants that we support there, like Red Hat and SUSE and others. So if you want to double check to make sure that your entire application stack, including the infrastructure, will run on Hyper-V, we have all those resources available on ms.com.
And I would imagine that the community of applications available when you're talking an enterprise environment versus at-home environment is going to be a much narrower scope.
It's fairly broad. We've done extensive testing, so we certify and support right up into the operating system. So if we do all the way, all the vertical certification up to the operating system, then anything that's been supported run on that operating system should theoretically then be supported run on Hyper-V.
Okay.
So we support that all the way up.
So we know some of the benefits now of virtualization.
Yep.
We know how to tell whether your given applications are going to be compatible with that. Let's go back a little bit more to the basics. Speaking of like a hardware-based server that might be running workloads, and then a virtualized workload, what are some of the other nuances?
Right, so in some of the other videos, we talked about the lineup of the Windows Server 2012 editions. We talked about in the low-end Foundation Server and Essentials is great small business offerings. And then generally speaking, Windows Server Standard, we see customers running that of all sizes. And I like to think of Windows Server Standard as our workload workhorse. It does support VMs, and so we do have license grants for a customer run VMs on top of that. But they're increments of 2. So for every license of Windows Server Standard, a customer would get 2 VMs.
Okay.
I like to refer to that as a la carte virtualization. But if a customer is going to decide that they're going to consolidate their servers and actually move to a virtualized platform, then Windows Server Datacenter really is the right pick for them.
Okay. And
it's a fantastic product that we've been actually doing very well with Newegg on. It's the right operating system for customers, again, who are looking to virtualize, because there is no virtual headroom in the number of VMs that they could spin up on that server. The only limitations that would be had is the actual physical server capabilities. So if you could only run, say, with acceptable performance, say 10 VMs, that's the limitations of the server, not the operating system.
Okay, so you'll only be limited by the hardware then, basically.
Right.
Now, when you're talking standard, how many VMs can you run with standard?
You can run as many VMs as you want, but again, you have to, if you're running Windows Server in them, you have to buy increments of more Windows Server Standard to cover as many VMs. So as an example, let's say a customer wants to buy a great box and it's capable of running 15 VMs, or let's say, make it easier, 12 VMs. They'd effectively have to go buy 6 copies of Windows Server Standard to get the rights to run 12 VMs, right? Because it's for every copy there's 2 VMs. 2 times 6 is your 12. With Datacenter, they just buy 1 copy and they're licensed for as many as they need.
Okay.
And my guidance to partners, and when I talk to customers, is most customers and partners are creating what's called a virtualized cluster, right? They'll have 3 or more servers in a cluster and they'll run the VMs across any one of those servers. Make sure all those servers are licensed with Datacenter, so you never have to worry about what VMs are sitting on what server. You just know that you're licensed all up. It's just an easier solution to implement.
So data center seems more suitable for data center use?
Well, and I'm glad you actually raised that, because some people say my data center is not quite a data center. It's a product name, but really the intent behind it is it's unlimited virtualization.
Okay.
So don't get so hung up on the name as much as it is unlimited virtualization.
All right, and virtualization, as we've already discussed, can open up the doors to running all sorts of virtual machines, virtual applications, and basically it's almost like you get many, many servers out of your single server.
Right,
Depending,
and
of
the
course,
density on server technology that we're seeing today is just getting bigger and bigger, right? We're testing today 15 kilowatt, 18 kilowatt racks, 52 U's, where we're screaming out 1,100 VMs quite easily. We're seeing 4, 6 racks and total storage capacity with well over a petabyte of storage capacity. It's just amazing, the amount of technology that's in the marketplace today, and the price performance. If you think back, I don't mean to geek out too hard, but if you go way back to the mainframe days, we're at that capacity and then some at a fraction of the cost.
That's pretty impressive, and
Right.
it's also seems like you're just trying to make us desktop users kind of jealous with the.
Well, you see, the desktop user is actually benefiting from virtualization as well. We won't cover here today, but I will sort of pep around a little bit. There is desktop virtualization or client virtualization. It's called VDI in the industry, virtualized desktop infrastructure, and so the future worker could potentially be logging into a VM through what they call a thin client. Some thin clients are actual devices that sit outside screens, or some thin clients are actually baked inside monitors. And that VM is being run from a server that's running somewhere in the data center. What's really cool about that, and we support that with Windows, the Windows ecosystem across Windows Server and Windows 8, is that that VM will always be secure. That VM will never go down. The VM will always be transportable to wherever the user is, and their data will flow with them. So that's VDI. That's basically extending of virtualization into the client world.
All right, Jim. So let's jump back to Hyper-V,
Right.
Hypervisor. I understand this is a newer version as compared to past versions.
Right. We're on a third release of Hyper-V.
Okay.
And we're quite proud of the capabilities that are in Hyper-V. So as an example, let's refer to this slide here. You can see that we've compared Hyper-V when it was in Windows Server 2008 R2 versus where it's at today with Windows Server 2012, and then the improvement factor.
Okay.
And these are all metrics that when IT administrators, partners, and customers are looking at a virtualized platform, they're going to consider these as important variables to their decision on what platform they choose. So today, in the past with Windows Server 2008 R2, we supported 64 logical processors on the hardware. We've blown that up to 320. That's a 5x improvement, and we haven't seen the hardware acceleration actually come up to that yet. Physical memory, we supported 1 terabyte physical memory in 2008 R2. We're up to 4 terabyte today.
Okay.
And these are just phenomenal resources.
So it's almost difficult to build a server that can even match up to what it is capable of.
You can, but it'd be very big and very expensive.
Okay.
You know, a lot of horsepower, you probably won't know what to do. Another one, and this is more industry leading, is around the virtual processor per virtual machine. So you can see we made a 16x improvement from 4 to 64.
Okay.
This is really big, as is memory dedicated to every VM. So imagine having a server that could support, say, 20 terabytes of memory, and then being able to allocate 1 terabyte per VM. That's a significant amount of compute horsepower, depending on whatever the application is that's running on it. And when we've done a lot of this testing across the nodes and the virtual machines, we have this test that we commonly do at our events called the I/O meter. So we can see from a single VM, how many I/Os are we getting in and out of that VM. Jeff Woosley, who's one of our principal program managers, does this test very well. And you'll see if you do any searches on him doing this test, we've actually been able to get up to 1 million IOPS in one VM, and that restriction was really tied to the HBAs of the server itself. So if we had actually faster hardware, we think we can do better on IOPS.
So basically, you're challenging the hardware vendors to make faster hardware to take advantage of
We
this
have
software.
tested this up very, very well, and it's done well. So when it comes to hypervisors, Hyper-V is certainly a first-class citizen in terms of scale and capabilities. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we look beyond just the VM itself, right? So we've looked at virtualizing the network and virtualizing storage, and all those capabilities are in box with Windows Server 2012.
All right, so if I have Hyper-V installed, what are some of the ways I might actually make use of that?
Right, so we actually, I mentioned some of the things that we've done in looking at virtualization and just beyond the VM itself. So I'd like to touch on a couple of things that you could actually use Hyper-V for. First is we have the scalability and performance. So we have the ability across any size of cluster to really scale up or scale down, just as customers would expect when running virtualized workloads. And we're able to have little to no performance degradation in that scaling. The second is Hyper-V Replica. I spoke of this earlier. So in cases where a customer wants a DR site set up, we have the ability to replicate VMs across data centers. And so if a customer's data center were to go down for whatever reason, we have the ability to bring up their data, their business through Hyper-V Replica.
Okay.
The complete mobility of the VM, this is really important. In the past, you probably heard live migration from us or vMotion from other competitors. This is basically the ability to move a VM from one physical server to the next. When we say complete VM mobility, we mean not just the VM itself, all its network settings, all its storage, everything moves. And that's big. That's a big change that we've made with Windows Server 2012. Network virtualization, this is really big. In the past, if I wanted to move a VM from a subnet of a network to another subnet, you'd have to coordinate the IP address transfers from one subnet to the other, and that broke the logic of the application, right? When a customer was trying to work with it. With network virtualization, we've actually removed that as an issue. So you can freely move the VM and keep intact its network settings anywhere in that network. And that means less headaches for IT administrators, more user uptime.
So whereas before you may have copied from one location to the other, and then you realize you have to actually dig in there, fix a bunch of settings, replicate the network settings from the original server you moved it from. I imagine from within one facility you might run into those issues, to say nothing of moving from one location to, say, somewhere else across the country. And here, basically, you're just cutting all that stuff out.
Done.
Beautiful.
In box. It's really slick.
It's
really slick. Storage virtualization. So we've actually virtualized the storage pool. So now you can create large amounts of storage in these pools and then dedicate VM store on off the storage pool. And then we move that storage workload along with the applications and the VMs that run with it.
Okay.
Done a lot of work in storage virtualization. For those who are in the storage world, you heard me mention in one of the other videos, we rewrote the SMB protocol. The SMB protocol is a storage protocol, and as a result of that, we've seen just screaming performance from our IOs on the storage front.
Very nice.
And then the Hyper-V extensible switch, this is really interesting. So we're able to, through the Hyper-V switch, be able to extend its network settings beyond some of the capabilities that we've had in the past.
Okay.
Or not had in the past, rather. And so when you add all of these things together, we've not only changed the way that we approached virtualization with Hyper-V, we've extended its value pervasively through the Windows Server 2012 platform.
Very nice.
And when used together, it's a very powerful, very powerful platform.
And you know, as I've already spoken to, I don't have a whole lot of experience with servers. I dabble in it. I try to learn as much as I can. I've never had to deal with any of these pitfalls that you might run into when you're jumping and you're trying to back up your data. You're trying to move your data from one location to another. You're trying to do maintenance, and you don't want any downtime. But I imagine there must be IT guys out there watching this. I hope you're watching this right now and saying, thank you. Thank you, Microsoft. Because it seems like you guys have taken a lot of those potential problems and just made it so it just works.
Yep. One of the things that we pride ourselves on at Microsoft is we eat a lot of what we build. We call it dog fooding internally. So Windows Server 2012 didn't start like any other Windows Server refresh or build. We actually took a very deep view into our own data center. So Microsoft operates a number of very big data centers to support online applications like Bing and Office 365 and MSN and Windows Update services. And so we have these large applications, and as a result, we have fairly large data centers that are spread throughout the world. So when we went to architect Windows Server 2012, we looked at not just what customers were doing today, but what really is cloud computing in the future. And we did that based on all of the experiences that we had from running these large-scale applications. And these are applications at scales that most enterprises will likely never get to. And so we build a lot of that insight into the Windows Server 2012 platform. And that's what makes this release very, very significant for us.
So, and as we all know, Microsoft, a fairly sizable company, fairly global, I might say.
I would say,
yeah. Just a little bit. So
we're around. We've been around for a long time, and in the data center, we've been around for a while. But Windows Server 2012 was really about, we're really establishing strong enterprise credibility. We always have had that, but this is just putting us a little bit further.
So if you're running a business and you've run into any of these issues that you might have had building servers, setting up services, probably Microsoft has also run into those at one point or another and has built all this to help solve all of those problems, as well as problems that you probably only run into when you're the size of Microsoft, I can guess.
We have. And we actually, as I mentioned, we dog food Windows Server 2012. So we're actually running we're running properties on MSN or Microsoft.com on the beta and the release candidate of Windows Server 2012. That's how strong we felt about the product, and had no performance issues.
So Jim is not only the president of Microsoft, he's also a client. Well, no, he's not the president.
We're definitely dog fooders, and so.
All right. So you guys can trust that Microsoft has not just built all this stuff, they've actually been using it and actually been validating and actually confirming that it's solving a lot of problems and helping people. Especially if you're a small business owner, you want to jump into a higher level of IT, and you might not have the resources, but Microsoft's really making that accessible. So Jim, any closing thoughts on virtualization?
Yeah, we've had a lot of customers and partners want to get their hands dirty with Windows Server 2012. So the best way of doing that is going up to Microsoft.com. We actually have an evaluation copy of Windows Server 2012 that you could run freely and test. And there's also a bunch of scenarios that you can test against. And so if you're interested, there's a wealth of knowledge on Microsoft.com with everything that to do with Windows Server 2012 and a free valid copy that you could run within your own data center of sorts and test around.
All right, very nice. So try before you buy feature available on Microsoft.com.
Correct.
All right, so check that out if you guys want to check out Microsoft Windows Server 2012. I'm Paul with Newegg TV. I've been talking with Jim from Microsoft. Thanks again, Jim, for stopping by today.
Thank you.
And thanks to you guys for watching. If you'd like to see more videos, as well as the other couple videos we have done on Microsoft Windows Server 2012, they are available on our Newegg YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time.